Alright guys, so I was able to get my map set up, quickly run through the rules and kind of see where we're at. Let's go over some of these rules. So the game is broken down into two types of scenarios. You have short scenarios, which are 3-turn scenarios. They do not use the full set of rules. Some rules or special rules are only going to be used in the major scenarios. I'm going to start with a short scenario just so that I can kind of get it to the table, show you guys how to play. Some just basics of it, how it plays. Eventually, I will get back and play the one of the major scenarios, so that way I can use some of these special rules, because I find them interesting, and I definitely want to see how they're going to impact the gameplay more so than the shorter scenarios. Not to say that I'm opposed to less rules, because sometimes it's really fun. It gets you started quickly. It gets you right into the action. You don't have a lot of waiting. So we're going to I'm going to go over some stuff that I think is kind of important. So basically the way this game is played is you're going to have a reinforcements phase, and you skip 1 through 3 unless you're playing so steps 1 through 3, you're going to skip those unless you're basically playing the major scenarios. So it would basically start with the reinforcements would be brought in. You're going to roll for support variables on your reinforcements table. You'd roll 2 dice for Rommel. On a 4 or less, he would leave the table. That one's actually, I believe, skipped in the short scenarios as well. So kind of an oversight where it probably should have been up here, so that, or a notation where it says that, you know, only step 4 is given in a particular scenario, that you're going to skip these top 3 in the short scenarios, because obviously when I looked through the books, 6 was in there too, so it's kind of a little oversight. Not a huge deal, really. I mean, you just have to read to find out. So movement phase, you're going to do your movement, your combat, your exploitation. Exploitation, only certain units can do it. They have to be yellow coded on the bottom in their numbers, in their movement, defense, and combat strength. So when they're yellow coded, then they're allowed to basically do overruns and attack during after combat. So they can attack and then combat again. Then you would do supply phase. The supply phase is actually pretty in-depth in this game, but like I said, in the shorter scenarios, it's one of the things where they've simplified it for the short scenarios, because it really doesn't apply unless you're getting into more than 3 or 4 turns. Then it's really going to start to take effect. So one of the things that I thought was kind of cool in this game, excuse me, is that step losses, just like other games, usually it had like a little dot on some of the newer ones. They put dots on the counters and you flip them. In this one, some of them have 4 steps. Now I know that Enemy Action, Ardennes, and a couple other ones actually have their counters where there's duplicate counters. So if it has 4 steps, which means it can essentially take 4 hits before it's gone, or the 4th hit it's gone. So on the first hit, you'd flip the counter. On the second hit, you would remove that counter and grab a new counter. And then on the 4th hit, well, obviously it's, you know, you take it back down, and then on the 5th hit, it's gone. So in this game, what they've done is they've created, which I thought was really cool, is that on the first hit, you flip it over. Well, on the second hit, you basically put this little single skull token on there. And basically what that does is that underneath, that means that, hey, this has already got a hit, right? And so then when it takes another hit, you go ahead and flip it to the 2 skull piece. So that's how you can get your 4 hits out of it. And that's pretty cool. It's just a different, unique way of doing it. I mean, now we're talking about an older game. They've obviously found better ways to do it, but I thought that was pretty innovative for, at the time, how they handled that situation. So basically, on the map, there's going to be some spots, as you can see right here. You have sand and desert, and there are no hexes, and that's because the terrain was so bad that units couldn't go into the sand. Like this. It's like we're talking deep sand. So any unit that moves along here, if they get hit and have to retreat, and they have to retreat into the sand, you have to remove them from play. You can't willfully go into the sand and desert. Therefore, there is no movement. It's restricted. It goes over in the books about that, which I thought was kind of a cool way to handle that. So it's really important that you don't want to get units too close in there. If the enemy's coming, you're going to want to move them away so that they don't have to retreat towards the sand. You want them to have an open path, basically, to get out of the way. So, unlike most SCS games, this game, like I said before a couple times, has its own unique supply. It's based off supply points, and there are actual like supply dumps, and you get so many supply points, and you have to ration them and basically move them with units to other places, so that your troops can basically stay in supply. And each supply dump represents 20,000 tons of supply, and you're going to need, by reading it, I would need a calculator and a pencil to take notes, basically so that I know where my supply's at and who is it going to, and so on and so forth. Again, in the smaller scenario, we're only going to use a very simple basic supply. Most SCS games, the supply line is, trace it to a road. They tell you if you have a landing zone or a drop zone, you would trace it to that, and enemy zone of controls negate that. And if you can't trace it a path, then you're out of supply. This game is going to go way more in depth to that once I get past the short scenarios and move into a longer scenario. So when we look over here at this next page, it talks about truck points, which again we're not using in the short scenarios. Dumps and dump captures for your points, we're not going to use those in the short scenario. And then the order of supply arrival, again, we're not going to use it in the short scenario that I'm talking about. So here we move through, half of this page gets knocked out due to the fact that we're going to do a short scenario, and I don't want to get too far into that. So then you have air support points. So each player is given one or more air support points to use each turn. A player can use his points to support any friendly attack or defense, and to conduct friendly barrage attacks. The Axis player may use them to reduce Malta in order to assist his supply convoys coming from Italy. Well, we don't use Malta, and it's another optional. It's another rule that you only use in the major scenarios. So again, we won't be using that. And then you've got some replacement steps, which we're not going to use those because we're playing a short scenario. So we would move over here basically to your artillery and barrage. So artillery units may conduct barrage attacks against units at or within their 2 hex range. Resolve barrage attacks in the friendly combat phase before making any regular attacks. So just like most SCS games, barrage always comes first. It's going to come before normal combat, so it gives you a chance to hopefully weaken some units that you weren't thinking you might be able to take. So if you've got some strong armor somewhere, some enemy armor, you might want to, if you're within range, to barrage them before you send in your infantry, because you don't want your infantry up against armor if you don't have to. Some hexes are going to give you bonuses, on hills and things like that, attacking from height advantages. So you want to take all that into consideration when placing your troops, but especially when it comes to barrage, you definitely want, I always use barrage for myself to hopefully knock out units or weaken them that I didn't think I was going to get a chance to do with my infantry. So artillery may not conduct more than 1 barrage attack per barrage segment, and may not split its barrage strength. Artillery may only barrage during that friendly barrage segment of the friendly combat phase. And basically that means is that you cannot attack twice with it. So you can't attack 2 different hexes and split your points. It needs to all be spent on one hex. And if you don't, then you can't go back and attack at another hex with it. That's basically what that says. Terrain and other features affect barrage attacks according to the terrain chart. Artillery units defend themselves with a regular defense strength of 1 when attacked in ground combat, and out of supply artillery fires at half barrage strength. So even if they're out of supply, they can still barrage, but they're just going to get half their point value instead of the full amount. So off-map hexes, we're not going to use those in the short scenarios. On-map holding boxes. So on-map holding boxes represent individual map hexes in expanded fashion so as to break up a few congested hexes. Units may not overstack in such hexes or in the holding box representing the hex. Both the units in the holding box and the hex it represents count together when supplying the stacking limit to that hex. Okay, fortifications. Map printed fortifications may never be built, destroyed. Such hexes have additional effects as listed on the terrain chart. So boxes are fortifications that players may build for his units. They represent both earthworks and extensive minefields. Boxes may be built at the beginning of a friendly supply phase and never at any other time. To build a box of a unit of any type must occupy the hex. The unit may not have moved in the same game turn nor be in an enemy zone of control. The unit must be in supply. Expend 1 supply point per box in there. So again, we're not going to be using it because we're not going to be using the supply points. So Divisional Integrity would be our next area basically to come over to. And in any attack or defense where one or more multi-unit divisions participate using all of their currently on-map components, shift the combat at odds 1 column in that side's favor. If both sides are eligible, they can cancel each other out. This shift can be beyond the usual 2-column shift max on the combat results table, for instance. So if a division currently only has 1 counter on the map, it is not eligible for this shift. No side ever gets a shift more than one column in its favor for this reason. Even if more than one eligible division participates in the attack, that participating elements from a given division need not stack together, provided they are all involved in the combat and are subject to any adverse combat results. The combined arms. In any attack or defense where the player has at least 1 stack that has both an armor unit and infantry unit, the player receives a die roll modifier for 1 in his favor. The attacking player may get this modifier for up to 4 stacks of a +4 total. If both players have combined arms, use that net modifier. So again, combined arms is a pretty important piece to me. Because one unit may not be able to do it by one stack of units may not be able to take out a stack of armor by themselves. They may need that backup support of a friendly hex, and that's kind of important for me. And to combine the arms of each player. So your Axis Special Rules Initiative, the Axis player turn is always first, exception for those in the short scenario. So in scenario 1, Operation Crusader, it's going to be the allied player goes first. So Italian surrender rule, any Italian unit to be found out of supply on turns 1 through 6 automatically surrender before suffering any of the regular out of supply effects. When a unit surrenders, remove it from play and place it in the dead pile. Do not apply this rule to any unit, Italian or otherwise, on or after turn 7. If such a surrender occurs deep behind friendly lines, what occurs is actually attrition to desertion, poor maintenance, and lack of repair parts. The unit is destroyed anyway, but this description allows the player to more accurately visualize what is going on. So this game offers something that I think is pretty cool and unique, and it is Rommel. So you get Rommel, the Desert Fox, in this game as a counter. You're going to be able to get to move him on the board. He does not have any combat, but there are some things that happen with Rommel, and I'll go into those right now. So on the map, the combat table lists that the Rommel shift for attack only if it is for attacks and defense. Rommel has a number of special capabilities in the game, but he is not a unit in the normal sense. So he has no attack, he has no defense, zone of control, or movement allowance. Rommel can move from any Axis-occupied hex to any other from over any distance, but must always stack with Axis units. Should the stack he is in be destroyed by enemy combat, the Axis player automatically displaces Rommel and to any desired Axis hex. He ignores enemy units and terrain as he moves, but may never end his movement in a hex containing either enemy units or prohibitive terrain. He may move in the friendly movement phase or the exploitation phase. He is never affected by combat results. He can never be killed. There is a small exception, and we'll go over that. If the units he is stacked with advance after combat or retreat, Rommel may go with them. Rommel doesn't count for supply and is never considered out of supply or subject to out of supply effects. The units he stacks with at the beginning of any given phase have the following abilities. So on movement phase, units may conduct overruns even if they start in an enemy zone of control. Units he stacks with at the movement of an overrun get the Rommel combat bonus. So for defense, if the hex he is in is attacked, the defenders get a 1 column shift to the left and a combat bonus. Which that's a really big deal. That's a really good deal, especially if you were outnumbered 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. Now you can be a 2-to-1 or a 1-to-1 odds, so that really helps you out. Attack is if he stacks with one of the stacks involved in an attack, that attack gets a column shift to the right. If units in his hex are involved in more than one attack, each gets the bonus. So again, if you add up all your attack points, all your attack values, and you add up all your defense, you basically, to get that column, you divide both numbers by the smallest of the two numbers, and it gives you an odds. Are you a 1-to-1? Are you a 2-to-1, a 3-to-1, a 4-to-1, a 5-to-1, so on and so forth? I mean, usually they tap out at 7-to-1, and then anything above that just falls under the 7-to-1 column. And in this, basically what happens is if you were a 1-to-1 with Rommel and you're attacking, now you're a 2-to-1. And if you're being attacked and you're outnumbered, well, now you may have a chance to even the score so that your losses are much less because of that. And then during exploitation phase, units which begin this phase stacked with Rommel may use exploitation even if in an enemy zone of control or not exploitation capable. So he can literally make any units exploit capable, and units that were in someone's zone of control can still attack, which that's a huge phase. Rommel may use his special rule to affect any Axis stack, Germans, Italians, or a mix of them. So going to see Adolf Hitler to recharge. This is what I talked about in the beginning. So during a phase, you roll 2 dice for Rommel every turn after he enters play. On a 4 or less, you remove him from the game map and place him on the turn record track in the next turn. He would return as a reinforcement with his Nazis batteries all charged up, ready to, lead the Reich to victory. The thing is that he basically goes back to Germany to see Adolf Hitler, and then he returns the next turn to get basically more instructions. So he disappears for a turn. We won't be using that in the short scenarios. The Trento truck option, we're not going to be using that in the short scenarios. Then you'd get into Malta, we're not going to use that. The Axis reinforcement entry. You've got the Lair parachute battalions. You got some Camperfuge Hecker exchange. The Axis reinforcement entry. And then there's some allied special rules. And most of these are going to take place in the longer scenarios, so we won't even go over those right now. I just don't want to give you more information than when you see the video wondering why I'm not using those rules. So simplified supply rules. So because of the short scenarios, we use this supply. During each player's supply phase, check each friendly unit for supply by checking to see if a path free of enemy units and zone of controls can be traced off the appropriate map edge. East for the Allies, west for the Axis. Or to a friendly owned port. Friendly units negate enemy zone of control for this purpose. The trace must be through passable terrain exclusively. If the unit or stat can trace it, it is in supply for the next turn. If it cannot, then it's basically out of turn, and you go into the effects of out of supply and what that does to your people. So basically, like I said, I'm going to get the rest of this set up for you guys. We're going to basically be going over the Operation Crusader. It's 3 turn lengths. Allied player goes first. They're going to have no reinforcements with 3 air points for the Germans, for the Axis, and 5 air points for the Allied. Let me go ahead and see if I can get you guys a nice view of the map here. Give me 1 second. Let's get up and move this thing out. Alright. So over here, we are going to, as you can see over here, we're going to have Benghazi, and you're going to have all your tracks, your Axis, air support. This is your terrain key modifier, so that way if I don't know what something is, I'll know it. Your dead units get put up there. I've already went ahead and marked the Axis starting air points. And then you'll see, like I talked about, the sand and desert, how there's no hexes on these. You can go here, but you cannot go here purposely, and if you have to retreat into there, it's going to be disastrous for your troops. You're going to see Libya, and then Tobruk, Ghazala, Baradia, Egypt. And basically, you've got your roads. And then over here, you'll notice escarpment. You've got ridges, hills. So basically, that's kind of my overview of the turns and what we've got going. The next time we see this video, we'll actually be playing it, and I'll explain as I go along there. Thanks for watching.